Hey guys, and welcome back to the OT for Life podcast. Today's episode is episode 6 of our Level 2 Fieldwork mini-series. We have already recorded and released 5 episodes so far, and today is the last one in this mini-series, and it's going to be such a fun episode for you guys. I sit down again with Rochelle and Maya, and we recap everything that they experienced and went through within their level 2 fieldwork experience. At this point, they have completed their 12 weeks and have had a couple days to sit back and relax and start to digest everything that they went through. And we just have a great talk about what it's like to be a student going through their first level 2 fieldwork. And I want to encourage everybody, if you're listening to these words right now and you have questions about fieldwork, or you want to share a story that you went through when you were in fieldwork, please reach out to me. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, anything at all. You can email me and let me know. And I will be responding to those comments in future episodes. So I really hope that you enjoy this episode and the entire series. So if you haven't listened to the first 5 so far, go back and listen to those and then listen to this one so you guys can get caught up on everything that's going on. I also want to give a huge shout out to my students, Rochelle and Maya, for sitting down and recording these episodes with me throughout their fieldwork experience. You guys are the absolute best, and we had so much fun doing these interviews for you guys. And I know that the 3 of us got a lot of value out of doing this, and we hope that we can share that value with you guys, our listeners. So enjoy. If you're interested in occupational therapy, this is the place for you. This show aims to explore our profession by sharing who we are and what we do. Because for us, occupational therapy is more than just a job. Hi, I'm Sarah. Welcome to OT for Life.
Yeah, I feel like fieldwork, I just have been thinking about it so much, especially that weekend right after it ended. I was waking up and I was singing the songs in my head, and I was still thinking about some of my kiddos, and even thinking about my notes. Did I submit them all? I still haven't heard back from anybody. Did I finish everything I was supposed to finish? It wasn't until around maybe I don't know, later in that week following fieldwork that I actually stopped just thinking about fieldwork and stopped stressing about it, and actually got back to my normal life.
Can you believe that you are done?
Oh, yeah, yes. Now I'm done. But at a certain point, I think it was that Friday night when I was completely done, it just felt so surreal to me. It felt like I still had a lot of work to do. And I even that Saturday, I was like, okay, I need a treatment plan. I was like, wait, I don't need to do that.
I feel the same way. That Friday leaving, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm done. And then I got home and I realized, oh wait, no, I still have to write all my notes from today. And then I still felt the same way. All weekend I was thinking, oh, do I have to make corrections to these notes? I haven't heard anything. Should I get on the electronic medical record system? No, I'm just going to enjoy this weekend. I'll check on Monday. But there were no corrections to be made. But good. No, I feel you.
Wow. I think it's so interesting because everybody has been so kind of wrapped up, intertwined. This has been so much. This has been your life.
Yes.
For the past 3 months. And then all of a sudden it's done.
Yeah. I know.
Yep. Then what?
I know. What do I do now?
Yeah, definitely. Especially those last 3-4 weeks, you're doing all of it. You've got your full caseload and you're just going. You don't stop. And then all of a sudden it's wait a minute.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess I'm done. And there's nothing. What do I do now?
I know.
I mean, of course, relax and
right.
Other things, but
all that stuff.
It's kind of abrupt halt.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let me ask you guys, how do you feel right now? I mean, so much has happened. I think we've all been through a lot, you know. I had students of my own, and we all had stuff that we were learning and things that we were going through. What would you say your current mindset is right now?
I feel so good. I honestly do. I've been getting a lot of sleep, and it feels great. And I've just been able to like hang out with my friends and not have my mind somewhere else. And I think that is like the best thing, like kind of just having like my mind back, because even when I wasn't doing work or actively like writing notes or actively writing like treatment plans, I was still like thinking so much. So I think it feels good to kind of be a little bit more like at peace right now.
Yeah, I definitely feel the same way. I feel like I can, be exactly where I am. I'm not worrying about looking up articles or thinking about, oh, that's a good plan for one of my patients for the next week. I think that it's just been nice to kind of relax. I still feel like every morning I'm still waking up with a little bit of anxious feeling, like, oh, no, it's going to be, what am I going to have to do today? But then I remember, okay, no, you're done. You don't have to worry about fieldwork anymore. And it's kind of slowly weaning away.
Right. And you guys only have about a week or 2 weeks until you go back to school. So it's a little bit of time. And I, quite frankly, am jealous because I didn't get a week or, a couple weeks off in between. And my students were like, this is so great. We're going to go back and relax and sleep in. And I'm like, me too? And I'm like, yeah. Just tell all your clients you're canceling. That's not going to happen. But yeah, so let's kind of take a minute and kind of just think back to the last couple weeks since our last meeting and wrapping up fieldwork and what happened, how you guys were feeling about it, anything like that.
I remember it was around my 10th week where I had one of my kiddos, and he was so funny too. His mother told us that they were going to be gone for the next 2 weeks. And I remember that's when it hit me like, oh my God, I'm not going to see him again. Like that's when it kind of hit me that this is like, actually like this is coming to an end. And from then on, either myself or my CI would tell the kids like, oh, this is Maya's last week or last 2 weeks, and just like prepping them for it. But I think that was the moment when it hit me, was like, oh my God, like this is my life right now, but it's like almost over. But
I think, a lot of our clients get very attached to the students. And so you might not think that it's a big deal. Like, yeah, okay, like my field work's over, I'm done and I'm going back to school. But the caregivers and the clients can get really attached to you. And so it's always good to start prepping some of them. Some of them, they're whatever, like it's fine. But others get really, really attached and they might need a little bit of processing time so that they feel like if they want to make you something or if they want to say something, something like that they have the time to do that.
Yeah. And I was very grateful because I did get some cards and get some like really nice messages from parents and from some of my kiddos. So that was great. But as far as wrapping up, I feel like the biggest thing that I did was shared some of my resources with my CI, and materials that I have been using, and just let her know, like, you can continue using this if you want. This is what I've been using with, X, Y, and Z, and just let her know, like, you can keep this and use it as you want. So that was like the biggest thing that I did.
Yeah, my last few weeks kind of look similar. I was with my full caseload, and I guess I was also having to present a couple of my projects that I had been working on throughout throughout the semester, so that it was kind of nice to wrap those things up and check things off my list. But even with adults, you still have to prepare people for when you're leaving. I had some people I had been working with since week 2, and so we had definitely grown a strong bond together, and people were starting to ask, oh, it's your last week's coming up soon. Oh, I'm going to miss you. But it was nice. It was nice to hear a lot of people in that last week, gave cards or, said nice things. So that it was nice to get kind of positive feedback throughout that full last week. That was really nice to hear. But yeah, even with adults, you still have to prepare people for when you're leaving, and people do get attached, and they're caregivers, their family members. Everybody really involved.
Yeah. So anything else that kind of stands out to you guys about the last week or maybe the last couple weeks?
maybe just like my feelings in general, I felt like super confident. Yeah, so that stood out to me.
Awesome.
Especially my last week. I think it might have been like I think it was my actual last session on Friday, where I went in with some ideas and it didn't go that way at all. And it was almost like, I was like, oh, we can do this, and I'll make it like, I'll fine tune it to what you're working on. Like, I was just like very open to trying new things, and I didn't stick to my like treatment plan like I normally do. And I feel like it really worked out. And even when I talked to his mom at the end of the session, she was like really intrigued and into it. So I just felt like, oh, like, am I an OT? Like,
that's
nice.
So cool to hear. Like, you know, it just sounds like all the pieces came together.
Yeah.
And everything made sense. And when something went wrong, you still had a handle on it. You know,
Yeah.
and I think that just proves how much you learned and how much you grew throughout the experience.
Yeah.
That you're like, I know this kid, we're going to do this. Wait, we're not going to do that? All right, let's pivot.
Yeah.
We're going to go over here. And I still, you know, you still had a handle on that situation and felt comfortable, and it didn't stress you out.
No, it didn't. Yeah, it went good. Yeah.
Nice. I think something else that stood out for my last couple of weeks were that a lot of my patients were meeting goals in those last few weeks, and it was just like a really great feeling because it had been stuff that we had been working on throughout the past couple months, and it was really nice just in those last few weeks where, you know, we would be working on something and then they would do it and they met their goal, and I would just be like, yes. And I felt like, you know, I was more excited than them half the time, but it was kind of fun to be able to end on those like upswings for some people. I mean, not everybody met all their goals, you know, you can't pick that, but it was really nice to have some of those people just really knock it out of the park.
Yeah. And especially, it sounds like some goals that you guys had been working on and addressing for a while.
Yeah.
So like actually see it like gel and like, they get it now. Okay.
Yeah. It was cool.
Yeah.
It was a good feeling.
Good. Yeah. I love it. I think it's so crazy to me right now to be sitting here with you guys.
Yeah.
You know, I think back to our first recording before you guys had even started, you know, and it's absolutely insane that 3 months have passed. So much learning has happened, and here we are.
We made it.
We made it.
Yeah, you guys did, and it's fascinating, you know. And I think you guys might not even be able to see how much growth has really happened right now, but you'll notice, like, with time, and like even going back to school, you're gonna go like, oh yeah, I know that. Oh yeah, I got that. You know, and all of a sudden, like, you're gonna have a very different lens, a very different perspective, and a different way that you guys are going to carry yourself. Of like, I'm an OT now. Right? I did that.
I definitely think that going back to school in all of my classes, I will be thinking of the information I am learning. I got that information. Now I'm going to try to think, what will I do with that information? Because I think that's the hardest thing at going into your first level 2 experience. You've been thrown so much information, and you could recite it. You could get A's on all your tests, and you can totally bomb fieldwork. Yeah, that just can happen. You can be a straight A student, and just if you can't apply it, that's what you're graded on. You know, so I think that's definitely the lens I'll take. Is okay, this is the information. Okay, I got it now. Okay, what am I going to do with this, and how am I going to use this to try to, you know, be an OT and help somebody?
Yeah, I think like what you're saying is really kind of tying it to that bigger picture. Now you have names, you have faces, you have diagnoses that you've worked with. You have a snapshot of one realm of OT, right? And so now everything that you're going to learn from this point on, you're going to constantly be reflecting on your level 2 experience, but then also probably tying in some of your level 1s as well.
Sure, definitely.
And I'm sure like it's just going to start to kind of get the wheels turning a little bit differently. And again, like that whole awareness is just going to be shifted now because of this experience.
Yes, I agree 100%. And at a certain point, I did think that I did wonder how certain programs were, or how students felt from certain programs that had like their 2 level 2s back to back at the end of the program. And I think that is a positive of us having one in the middle and then going back to school, because I do think I was more on that side where I was doing so good, getting straight A's on everything, but not thinking about the big picture. I was thinking about doing really well and understanding this for the test or like, but I think now, like you said, my mind is going to be, I'm going to be so much more focused on that information and like, what can I do with it as opposed to like, how can I get an A on this test? And I think, so I think that is a good part about us having field work in the middle and then going back to school.
Yeah. Definitely. And even though we're changing to a different setting that we're learning about, there's still going to be information that can be applied.
For sure. I think that's a really kind of cool point that you just brought up, Maya. And I hadn't really been thinking about that, but like put yourself in the shoes if you were in a program that did their level 2s back to back. And I think, don't quote me, but I think some programs, they might get like a week or 2 off in between. So pretty similar. But then imagine that you guys were starting your second one when you go back to school, you're starting your second rotation.
It'd be tough.
Oh, yeah.
And it would be a different setting and
you would have to like shift your mindset of going from like, for me, like going from peds to like adults, and that would be really difficult to do in like a short amount of time.
Yeah, you also wouldn't have time to digest everything that you just learned.
And still prepare for what you have to prepare for. Yeah.
And have some you time too.
Yeah.
Like where does that happen? I think that would be really interesting to bring, maybe for like a later episode, bring on people that have done 2 fieldworks, a year apart or 6 months apart with a significant time in between, and then bring on some people that went pretty much back to back and kind of hash out like what the pros and cons were for each situation. Yeah, because I was always, to be honest, thinking like, oh, it must be so weird to do a level 2, you become a treating OT, and then you have to go back to a level 1 and have a full year of school before you actually go out and really get to treat again. And in my mind, I always kind of thought about that negatively. But actually now that I'm thinking about it, you guys are kind of showing me another side of that. Now there's another year of growth that could happen based on what you guys have learned. And I'd never thought about that.
Yeah, you can also reach out to those professors that you see, just in the halls all the time. It doesn't have to be like a email after you're done kind of trying to reach out and ask questions. You can, if you see that professor, you can arrange to meet with them and really say, this doesn't make sense to me still, can we talk about this? You kind of have that professor guidance too for that extra year where you're there and you can meet with them and talk to them. I don't know. I know that, and I don't speak for PT students at all, but I know that some of the PT students at my site, they had theirs back to back, and it seemed like they got to, and this could just be my site too, but it seemed like they got to be really a lot more independent as students quicker too. They took on more patients, and they were more independent in terms of their instructor. I mean, their instructor was always watching them, but maybe, they'd be a little bit further away in the gym or whatever. So it seemed like the PT students, but they had done 2 years they had done all of their schooling, and then they were doing some rotations before they were done. So they did seem more independent, and they all seemed like they kind of got it a little bit quicker than I felt like I did, at least. So I don't know, maybe that's a pro of doing it all at the end, is that they had all of their schooling. They had learned everything they were going to learn. Right. And then they were they got it. And they were thrown into it, and they seemed like killing it right away. I don't know.
The students that you're specifically referencing, this was their like second rotation, or
there was a lot
not their first.
Right. There was a lot of them, and a lot of them it was because whatever program they were in, they had done shorter rotations throughout their schooling, and then some of them, they were doing their long, either 16 or 12-week rotations, and they had a couple back-to-back, and then they graduate. And then they were, like, going off to take their boards.
Got it.
So.
Interesting. Yeah.
But those ones that were doing those long rotations at the end, they seemed just like they were PTs. Like, maybe you wouldn't even be able to tell they were students still.
But that might be us for our next one.
That's true.
Jumping right in and getting right to it, just because we've done one already in 2 years of school. So it's kind of the same by that point.
That's true.
Yeah.
And I wonder too, this kind of goes back to like mindset. If you know that you're going into a program that goes back to back, you're preparing yourself
Right.
for it. You know that you're going to have 12 weeks and a week or two off and then another 12 weeks on top of that. So potentially at no fault of you guys, like you just prepared to do your 12 weeks and then have another year of school. So
Yeah, that's true.
it's hard to say the realistic part of it because
Right.
we don't know.
Yeah.
We only know what we know, right?
Yeah.
So let's chat just briefly. I know at the midterm episode we had talked about the AOTA midterm evaluation, and then that happens again at the end, and that's the final, where it's basically like the same paperwork that you go through, you get scored on. So definitely check out the midterm episode where we talk about that. So at the final, it's pretty much the same thing, right? You're just hoping that your scores bump up a little bit more and ultimately pass. And the numbers are higher at the midterm, so you have to get more points in order to pass, right? But there's one thing that is very different that you don't have to do at midterm and you have to do at final. And I'd love for you guys to just kind of share a little bit about what you guys thought about it. And that is the student evaluation of the fieldwork experience, the SEFWE.
I thought it was nice to be able to give feedback to my site, but I thought that it wasn't, I don't think there was enough room to provide feedback about the site and to my instructor specifically. I thought a lot of it was, how was your orientation, which I thought that might have been a nice question to ask at midterm maybe, because if I gave my orientation scores very highly, I thought my orientation was good, but if I had a poor orientation, or if I felt like that, I thought that might have been a little bit more appropriate at midterm to be able to say, I still don't know about this, let's fix it before we finish. But I thought it was mostly a lot of just like what your caseload was, what were the diagnoses that people had, and then there is a space at the end where you can provide recommendations for your site or changes, but it is just like a short box. So I thought there could be a little bit more, specifics that could pertain to your instructor as well as the site.
Okay.
Same. I feel like for a lot of like the orientation stuff, like my site has been taking students for like a long time, and they've been taking a lot of students. So I think they're like knocking it out of the park with all of that.
I mean, I feel like the main part is to be able to provide the students an opportunity to give feedback that you have to go over with your supervisor. And so I think as a student, oftentimes it's very hard to give negative feedback to a site, right? Or constructive criticism, about your experience and the things that you kind of went through. And I feel like this is a good opportunity to be able to have that reflection with your supervisor, especially if you're one of those people, and this was me as a student, that it was hard to say these things to my supervisor. But then the other valuable piece about doing the site evaluation is for potential students that might be considering that site or might have gotten placed there. So then they get kind of a Cliff Notes version of what other students have experienced as well.
Right. And they also gave us the option to like check a box to say like, oh, can future students placed at this site reach out to you? And if so, provide your email. So I did check that box. So I think it is cool to not only read it, but then be able to speak to someone who's gone through it and like get like specific advice.
I think that's great. I hadn't heard of that. And maybe I have an outdated form or something, or maybe I just haven't seen it in a while, but I think that's fantastic, especially if you have questions. Or, I mean, I kind of look back to our first meeting, and if you guys had read this at your sites, if you could have reached out to a previous student and been like, hey, give me the rundown. What should I expect? How do you think I could succeed? What were your challenges? And of course, everybody's experience might be different, and you might have to take things with a grain of salt, but you get that lived experience.
Yeah, which I think is very valuable, maybe a little bit more valuable than like just reading like things that are already like preset, like something that maybe like orientation may not be something that they're worried about. Maybe they have a specific question about like an assessment that or like an intervention or like certain like specific questions that were not covered on that?
Yeah, I think it's just kind of giving more specifics as well, you know, like specific ages within pediatrics or specific diagnoses, anything like that. Yes, you can read it on the form, but also being able to actually be like, hey, like you were with my supervisor. What was your experience like? So it's I think it's a valuable tool. And
Definitely.
I always enjoy that piece with my students of like, give me some feedback. I want to hear like, maybe you guys liked everything of how it went. But if you were a different student, like, could you have handled the way that it went? Do you have recommendations, things to change, modify, anything like that?
I think that's something nice to add could be, like, if you were to write a letter to the next student, what would you say? I think that would be really, I think that would catch everything that they want to say in this. But when you're checking boxes and writing numbers, it's not specific, you know? Right.
So I actually, I went and did one of the, like, AOTA Fieldwork educator certification programs. And that was something that I picked up that somebody else had done. And I thought that was a brilliant idea. And so what I've done as a supervisor is I asked my students to write a letter to the future students. And then I put that in their little kind of like Fieldwork binder. And so it will have, there's a letter from me, and then I'll throw in a couple other of my students' letters of like what to expect, what their experience was like, and all of that. And I think that just kind of adds that kind of personal touch. And it gets them excited, but then it's also like, hey, like, I got through it. It's going to be hard, but it's going to be fun. Like, whatever stands out to them.
Right.
So I love that idea.
That's great. I like that too.
So let's go back and let's talk about what you guys thought your perceived strengths and weaknesses were at the beginning of the fieldwork and how you felt you addressed them throughout. You know, do you still feel like that there are potential weaknesses? Did they change at all?
So my strength, which I still think is my strength, is rapport building, especially with kiddos. Like, I just think I'm a lot of fun and kids just want to have fun. As far as my weakness at the beginning, or my perceived weakness, it was kind of not knowing me knowing when to cut off the fun, but not knowing if the kids would listen to me, because it's like, hey, we were just having fun. Now you want me to like work. I think I just got really good with just like giving narratives to a lot of things. So like, okay, you really like, I don't know, you really love Pokemon. So like, we're going to make this about Pokemon, even though you are like doing buttons, or even though you're doing X, Y, and Z. So just bringing the fun into the work. And that, I learned that really early on. So it was like, oh, just do that and they'll do the work.
And you can almost be like, well, Pikachu's not going to like it if all the buttons aren't done.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden, like, you're not even, like, the authoritative figure.
No, it's like, Pikachu, come on. He's so sad. Yeah, and I think that was, like, not a big deal at all. And I think it shouldn't have even been something that I was worried about, because I picked up on it really fast. Yeah, just make the work fun. And
I love it.
Yeah.
You'll never work a day in your life.
You'll never work a day, yeah.
And for me, I think that my strength, at first I had said it was interacting with people and reading people and, you know, getting different occupational histories from people. And I thought that still stays true. I think that was definitely one of my strengths, even up until the end, was just interacting with people, figuring out what they like, being able to talk to people, asking somebody like, oh, are you sure? Like, are you feeling okay? I thought that was good. And then I had said at the beginning that my weakness was just like technical skills, which is pretty broad. But I think that, I think what I meant was doing like different testing and doing manual muscle testing, range of motion, sensory testing, different assessments. And I think that I got so much practice that I think that those definitely are strengths now. I think that my current weakness would be grading activities, and I know that's going to just keep coming up, and applying evidence to research to try to incorporate evidence-based practice. I think those two are like huge and are never going to go away. And I think that those are still tough. And I'm sure that even practitioners that have been practicing for a while probably still struggle with
both.
Yeah, both. Okay, there you go. Yeah.
I mean, definitely the evidence-based practice.
Yeah.
You know, I think there's always new research coming out, and there's so much out there. And when you're managing a caseload and you're managing home life and you're managing all of this, and all of a sudden now you're throwing in the evidence-based practice, it's like, it's so important, but it's very hard to kind of stay on top of it all too, you know, and I'm just being realistic here, you know. So that for sure is something that you continue to work on. And the grading of activities, I mean, you might get a new diagnosis, a new client, or even a diagnosis you're familiar with, but it's presenting completely differently, you know, or they have completely different likes. So being able to grade that activity based on the person, based on their occupations and all of that,
it's tough.
A life skill that you continue to work on. Maya, I want to call you out a little bit here, because I know one of the things that you were talking about that you were nervous about, maybe where you didn't quite feel prepared at the beginning, was documentation.
Yeah.
And I know that was kind of a continual thing that we talked a lot about in various episodes. Yeah. And so I'd love to just kind of hear what your thoughts are now at the end.
Yeah, it took me a while to get, I don't know, like, I feel like with my note writing, it would take me easily like 45 minutes. I think I was saying that. Yeah. That was like maybe through like week like 9. And I think it was just because I would sit down and I would have so much on my mind, and even just to get going, I would say like, okay, I just had like, you know, so many clients. What did I do with that kid? Okay. Like just having to recap that and just get started was like hard for me. But I think like really the last week, I was able to just sit down and just go. And I think I got really good at like kind of clumping things together versus like pointing out the like individual activities that I was doing. And especially my last week, I swear like I was writing them like in like, I don't know, maybe like 10 minutes, which is really good for me. Yeah.
I think a really valuable skill is really learning to put things together and focus your brain power on what you really need to focus on, and then try to systematically approach the rest of it. So you can just kind of get all that other stuff that needs to get done. Yeah. But the stuff that you really have to think about, that's where you're going to like use your main focus on. And I think in the beginning as a student, it's very hard because you think everything's important. Yeah. You think you have to talk about how the kid started walking with their left foot first, and it's like, that really doesn't matter, you know? Yeah. But yeah, like really kind of having that awareness of what's important, consolidating it, and getting it down to 10 minutes. That's awesome.
I was so proud of myself. Especially on my last day, I sat down, and this was at the very end of the day because I would not leave the clinic until I did all of my notes. And so my last day, I think I had 7 of them to do at the end of the day, and I just was like cranking them out. Yeah, and I was like, whoa, look at me.
It took 12 weeks, but you got there.
But I got there.
Yeah. And I think that just, again, it's interesting to point out because you went in before you'd even started worried about the documentation, and it continued to kind of be something that you were struggling throughout. Yeah. And that's okay. That might be something you struggle with at your next one, and you might struggle with for your first couple months of practicing. Yeah. But as long as you're aware of it and you start to kind of figure out these strategies to assist yourself in it, that's what you gotta do.
I agree, yeah. It's gonna work out, and I'm gonna be writing them in like 5 minutes soon at some point.
Yep. Oh yeah. You'll figure out ways that will make it easier and easier and easier.
Yeah, I feel like the note writing was definitely my weakness, I would say, and also my biggest challenge, not just in the beginning but almost throughout the whole process. But that last week really made me feel confident about it. So it feels good to know that I kind of conquered it a little bit. And I would say that that's the positive too, is like knowing that, okay, I did struggle a lot of the time, but I didn't struggle all the way until the end, and I did like grow, and I was like very proud of myself. So that was a huge positive too.
I love that. I love what you just said, because I think so many times people don't want to admit a weakness or to admit a challenge because they think that it might negatively reflect who they are. But in all honesty, it's really about highlighting maybe something that you're just not as good at, and then realizing the potential of how to overcome it, and then seeing the growth at the end.
Yes.
So
and I do think that like being a student, it does kind of feel like you have to get all of your questions out in the beginning, or learn all you can in the beginning, because you're supposed to be doing good for the rest of the time. So like being like struggling with that, like week 8 was like, okay, like can I ask about this, or can I get like advice, because I feel like I'm supposed to be better than I am right now. So like, is it okay to, and it's hard, but you still have to realize that you are still a student, and like you're not going to be perfect in everything. So
yeah, I mean, and I feel like too, even when I was a new grad, I'd have to document something, and I remember looking to my coworkers and being like, hey, this happened, how would I write that? Okay. You know, or like, let me just talk it through, and then okay, now I know what to write. So yes, it's a student thing, but it's also just a learning process. And there are times even today where something will happen, and like it specifically stands out to me when my students ask me and they're like, how would you write this? I'm like, hold on, let me think about it, and let's talk it through. And now all of a sudden we have it. So it's just kind of one of those things that you will continue to have to work on and improve upon. Not just a student. So Rochelle, what would you say your biggest challenges were, and also what maybe your favorite positives, or the biggest positives that you gained from your fieldwork experience?
I think that I would say my biggest challenge was intervention planning. I thought I kind of had the opposite problem of Maya. I thought that my documentation was like pretty good. It was fine throughout, it was pretty, I'm more of a condensed writer anyway. So that's just kind of what you have to do for this job, which is nice for me. But I think that the intervention planning was so tough. I think that especially in an outpatient adult rehab setting, I mean, some of these people have been coming for years, and they still have goals, but sometimes their goals are increasing strength, but you don't want to just sit there and have them do the weights all the time and be, because you know what I mean? And my instructor would challenge me too and say, it has to be something skilled. OT, if it's something that an aide could just take them through exercises, that's not skilled. And so coming up with different interventions, new things to do, and in a clinic, you only have so much equipment that you're not always getting new equipment that you can be using, and trying to incorporate evidence into those intervention plans. So I think that was my biggest challenge, even till the last day. And I think it will be. But I think that as I got to know people a little bit better, it got a little bit easier to plan for them, because I wasn't having to, reference their charts for what they've done in the past or how they moved, because everybody's so different. But I think that was my biggest challenge up until the end, and probably will continue to be a challenge when I practice. But I think that a positive would be, or the biggest positive was getting to see people when they would meet their goals, or like if they had told me the previous week, I want to be able to do this, and then we addressed it in a couple sessions and then they got it, like that was the best thing for me, being able to get to see like that, I don't know what you call it, like glimmer of hope or smile on somebody's face by them feeling accomplished, that they did something that they wanted to do again. Like that felt like real OT.
Right.
So it was
and
cool.
that that you played a role in that.
Right, exactly. That I helped facilitate that.
Yeah, I think that's one of the main reasons people go into this field.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely. And inspire hope and all of that. And I'm sure you guys got to see that a little bit in your level 1s, but my guess, and I'd love to kind of hear your guys' thoughts on it, but my guess is that it really hit home now with like, these were your kiddos, this was mainly you were pretty much working with them the whole time, and it wasn't just watching somebody else do it and like, oh good, like they just made that progress. It's like, like that happened because of something that I did or something that myself and the caregiver did or myself and the client paired up and did together.
Right. Yeah, I definitely think that it felt much different from level 1. Level 1, yeah, exactly like you said. You get to see the success. You get to see it. It's great. But when you feel like you actually made a difference, you're like, man, okay, I'm doing something right. You know? You're like, okay, I did something right. Let's keep this going kind of feeling. Like, you're like, you feel like something kind of clicks. Like, you're like, okay, I'm kind of getting it.
Yeah. I feel the exact same way.
Yeah. It's like those little victories that just kind of keep you going and make you remember like why we're in this profession,
right?
You know, because we deal with a lot of difficult situations and just kind of difficult things that we have to process and help people process.
Yeah.
And so when they do make progress or they kind of have an aha of like, oh, okay, maybe I haven't been making progress because of this, so if I change this, then maybe I will. I think that's really when you're like, all right.
Yeah. And it definitely helps when you're throughout this experience, when you're feeling overwhelmed, you're feeling like, oh, am I ever going to do a good job? Like, am I ever going to be a real OT? Oh, I have so much paperwork. I haven't slept. I haven't done, you know what I mean? And then you get that moment where somebody does something great and you're like, okay, this is why I'm here.
Yep.
And it feels good.
Yeah. So I think that's a really good segue into kind of reflecting back on self-care. And this has been something that we've talked about a couple times within our episodes. And I think it's something that needs to continue to be a part of the conversation because it is so important. And I know for myself, I'm still dealing with it, you know, in times of stress when I get super busy and bogged down and all of this. And to this day, I'm continuing to attempt to make changes and modifications to improve taking care of myself so I can continue to take care of other people. And so I know it was a struggle for you guys to give the focus that you needed to your fieldwork and then also try to utilize whatever you had left over for your own self-care and for your own relationships and your own life. Yeah. But let's I'd love to just kind of hear if you guys have any feedback about things that you went through, anything at all like that.
Yeah, I think what really helped for me, and like I've like kind of explained in the past, I would treatment plan for the following week. So my weekdays were pretty crazy because I would do the notes for that day, then I would come home and I would treatment plan for the following week of that day, and go to sleep very late and then wake up very early in the morning. So that was crazy, but it allowed for me to have some time on the weekend. And that was very important for me. It was like, it was very necessary to not spend every single day thinking about fieldwork. But there were a lot of times where I did sit there and like look at ideas or go to like the Dollar Tree and maybe buy like a couple of like toys and stuff. But for the most part, I would try to give myself like Saturdays to kind of not do anything and wake up when I wanted to wake up. And that was like very, very, very important for me. That was really it. It was really hard to take care of myself. And I would say, it was hard. I ate a lot. I overate a lot because it, felt good to eat. But,
I know this is hard to talk about, but again, I think it's so important to discuss these things because other people are going to go through it. And so, like, I'm not faulting you at all because I know that I just went through a really rough month where my diet went out the window and I wasn't sleeping and I was completely stressed and all this kind of stuff. And so it's important to try to catch yourself before you get to that. Yeah. And if you do, then implement, but try to start implementing strategies and that kind of stuff beforehand.
So what a big strategy that I used was on Sunday, I would spend that day like meal prepping, basically. So like I didn't have to think about what I was going to eat throughout the week because I didn't even have time to think about that. Right. So that was a big thing. So spend Sunday, go to the grocery store and just cook all your food for the whole week. And that helped me because I had no time to even think about that.
I feel like my self-care kind of went out the window as well. I had all intentions at the beginning. I remember in episode 1, I think I was listening to it and I said, I want to get back into working out. And I kind of laughed when I heard that, when I heard myself say that, because I was like, oh, wow, I don't think I did that once. But it's tough because I felt like as a student, I was never done. Like, I felt like there was no point where I thought, okay, I'm good to go for tomorrow. I mean, you could kind of feel, okay, this is what I have to go to bed at some point and that's it. But I felt like there was always something else that was going to be expected of me, whether I had all my treatment plans and whether they looked good to me that day. Like, I knew the next morning that, something was going to get changed, or I was going to be asked, what about evidence for something like this? So I felt like my job was never done. And so I think that's why I don't want to say I didn't have time to work out, because I probably did have time, but I definitely didn't make it a priority.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think what you just said right there is that there was always something else. And for me, like, I keep hearing you guys, like, you're reflecting on this as a student, but it still is so true even for me as a practitioner. There's still always something else. My work is never 100% done. So right. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, yes, I totally agree with what you just said there, because there's always something else. You just have to get enough done that you can hopefully sleep well enough that night, and then hit your to-do list the next day and try to get it done.
Yeah. I think the difference, I'm sure that this applies with a boss when you're working, but I think that as a student, you have somebody that's always watching you, always talking to you about your plans, questioning you, why did you do this? Why did you do this? Why, you know what I mean? Like, that so you have your plans, you're prepared for the next day, but then are you prepared for all the questions that you're going to be asked? And I'm sure that bosses do similar things, when they're asking their employees stuff, but it's kind of like that one-on-one, like somebody's eyes are always over your shoulder kind of feeling that I think that just made me even more nervous that I couldn't focus on anything else.
Right. It made you question everything and think further into it.
Exactly. It kind of made me second guess and then go kind of into a spiral of looking stuff up and then realizing what I had originally was fine. You know what I mean? Or I'd spend so much time delving into questions about one treatment plan, but that one the next day was fine and I would get questions on a different one. So it's just like I just never knew. So I think that just made me not ever feel like I was done.
Constantly just like reflecting and thinking and processing, right? Yeah, like trying to be proactive, but then also trying to like process of what happened.
Right, yeah.
Do you guys have any tips or maybe even any like strategies to help other students that might be preparing for fieldwork or in their fieldwork right now, of things that they could do to help promote their self-care?
I think like time management. So like you said earlier, you said I probably had time, but it wasn't a priority. I think that like we do have time or can make time for the things that we need to, because I had a classmate who was at the same side as me with pretty much the same caseload as me, and she was working out every morning. So she made the time. Yeah. So it is possible. So I think like just really sticking to a schedule and kind of making a priority and having your non-negotiables. Like, okay, I'm going to work out, or I'm going to get up in the morning and like stretch and maybe like meditate, like the things that you have to do. Mm-hmm. And then maybe like the other things, like for me, like my nails and like getting a pedicure, that is out the window. But like the things that you need to do and sticking to it.
Yeah, I think that's huge right there. Really prioritizing and time management.
Yeah.
I read something the other day, and somebody was like, how do you have time to read when you run your own company? Like that's basically like the premise of it. And I was like, man, yeah, like I feel the same way. Like I wish I had time to read. And somebody else responded, and they were just like, well, what are you willing to give up so you have the time in order to do that? Mm-hmm. And I was like, dang, yeah. All right. Like, I'm sure I could squeeze out 15 minutes, 30 minutes of my day that maybe I'm looking at social media or doing something else that's not productive and have time to read. I just haven't built that into a priority right now. So just kind of a different way to frame it of like, we all have the exact same amount of time per day.
Yeah.
And we all have responsibilities that we have to get done. But what is important and what is not.
Right.
And do what's important and don't worry about what's not.
Right.
Yeah.
Easier said than done.
Way easier said than done.
Definitely.
So, I mean, do you guys, I know we've already talked a lot, but do you have any other feelings about your first level 2 fieldwork? Any other kind of reflections that you have about your experience?
I definitely think that getting over that midterm, like weeks 4 to 8 kind of area, I mean, that's a long range, it's like half of it, but you know, getting through that like second month where I feel like there's a lot of feelings of like being overwhelmed, because a lot of times that your caseload's getting increased, you feel like you're not quite getting it yet, and it just gets really, really tough, and it can be frustrating. But I think like just trying to get over that, talking to who you need to, whether it's like a fieldwork coordinator or a friend or a family member, or just anybody you can, and getting that support through those like really tough weeks, I think that it kind of gets a little bit easier. It's still going to be challenging the whole time, but just going in knowing that it's not going to be easy, it's going to be challenging the whole time. I think knowing that, if I had known that mindset before, I think that it might have prepared me a little bit better.
I think having kind of those lifelines that you can reach out to is huge. And I can't remember if I said this in one of the past episodes or not, but when I was a student, I felt like it was a bad reflection on me to reach out to other people, classmates, or reaching out to the school or anything like that. And now that is something I tell my students all the time, or anybody that I come in contact with, you know, if they're going through and they're struggling, like even like past students I've had come to me and they're like, hey, I'm having a really rough go. And it's like, you have resources, utilize them.
Right.
You know, it's not a detriment to who you are. If anything, it's just going to help facilitate the situation. Yeah. And I wish that I knew that as a student, because it probably would have changed some things for me. Maybe made it a little bit better at times. Yeah. So I think knowing that is huge.
Yeah. And then I think that made the feeling at the end feel just like it was more more challenging than it was overwhelming. And I think that played a huge part in it. And then I think at the end just feeling like proud, like I did it. I got it done. I passed. I'm moving on to the next thing. I don't have to repeat anything. I think that was like the major, just feeling like, oh, like I can take a breath, relieved and proud.
Yeah.
When I walked out the day that I was done, I swear I felt like I won like the lottery. I was so happy because I was just so proud of myself. Like I had the biggest smile on my face. Like so many staff members gave me a hug that day. It just felt like, wow, like I did this, because, you know, it was hard. There were some points that were really hard. And like you said, I reached out to everybody possible. Like parents, friends, mentors, like, so yeah. And going into it in the beginning, I actually did anticipate that fieldwork was going to be my life. I knew that in the back of my mind, like this is what my summer is going to consist of. I knew that. But yeah, I think in the beginning I felt nervous, and towards the middle I did feel very overwhelmed. And then towards the end it was just like I could see the finish line, and it was like, just do it. And now that I'm done, it's like, oh, like I did it. Like, you know, I'm not even like thinking of all that stress that was my everyday life is non-existent. So even when it gets so hard, that, you know, it's not forever, and you can do it. You really can. And when you're done, you're going to be so proud of yourself.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice right there, you know, and I think some people are going to have a level 2 fieldwork and it might be relatively easy and they're just going to kind of breeze through, but generally I feel like most of them are fairly difficult, you know, and you're going to face challenges. They might be different, but you're going to face challenges. You're going to have to overcome some adversity, you know, some changes, some growth on your end, probably some realization of like, you know, I'm maybe not the best at that, and I need to bump those skills up as well. But also realizing this is what this is for, you know, to challenge yourself, to change, to come out on the other side and say, I did this, I accomplished it. I've got this.
Yeah, my dad, he gave me this analogy of like a bow and an arrow, and he's like, he's like, it may be hard right now, but what do you do? You have to pull it back in order to excel. So that's kind of what he's like, you're kind of going down to go up is kind of what he was saying. So
yeah. You're gonna be like stretched to your limit. And pushed, really thin and all of that. Yeah. Like, that's a great
as soon as
analogy.
you let go, like, you're going to take off soaring.
Yeah.
So it's kind of what you have to go through in order to succeed.
That's
great.
I feel like that's
I know, right? Can we just end on that?
Yeah, that was good.
So, we're at the end. This is now episode 6. We met right before you guys started, and we've met 4 times throughout your entire experience, and now you guys are done. You've had a couple days to a week-ish to just kind of just relax and get a fresh mind and all of this kind of stuff. And this is the first time that I've done this with students, and I'm curious. I'm going to kind of put you guys on the spot a little bit. I'm really curious about what you guys thought about meeting and having these recordings throughout your experience, because I know there were times that you guys had so much other stuff to get done. You were stressed beyond belief. You didn't have time for even your self-care, and here I am asking you to take an hour, a couple hours every other week, something like that, in order to do this. And so I'd love to hear a little bit about what this meant for you. Did it help? Did it hinder?
Yeah, I loved it because I felt like it was almost like therapy to kind of talk about it. I had talked about my experience with like my fiance, but he has no idea. So he can all he can do is really sit and listen, but it feels good to talk about what I'm going through with another student, as well as somebody on the other side of it who has students. So it's kind of like a little bit of like therapy to get to debrief and get advice from you too as well. That was like super helpful. And to be honest, I had some really tough times where I just didn't know how I would continue. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my goodness, what if I didn't finish the podcast? I really thought that like I would never want to like that would be so terrible. I wanted to continue it. So that really honestly like kept me going at some points too. Like I have obligations and I have people who are also like depending on me in other areas. Like what would it look like for me to not finish? So that was a part of it. It really was.
I like that honesty.
Yeah.
I don't think, my original idea was not, I didn't have that as kind of that framework for it. But I can definitely see that happening.
Yeah.
I've been doing some like mastermind groups, and it's kind of the same thing where we meet once a month and we're held accountable for everything, and we make goals and we hash out things that are difficult and challenges. And, I think just kind of having that kind of regular check-in with somebody who potentially could be going through similar challenges or has already gone through it, to be able to just be a sounding board and give advice and all of that.
Yeah, and I also think it's great too to just be someone who like a future student or a current student can listen to and take advice from. I think that's pretty cool. I didn't really seek out like something like this where like students were talking about their experience. So this is great that this is available. I didn't know if it was available for me, but I think it's great to kind of like leave something like behind for future students.
Yeah, a little legacy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I do hope that I will continue to do some more of these too. So the learning and the strategies and the growth and all of this will, continue and get some different experiences and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
you guys were my guinea pigs here.
Yes.
I feel pretty similar about the recordings. I think it was a really nice kind of like therapeutic way to get to talk through challenges and problems and get advice. And then also just to kind of know that I'm not the only student struggling. I think that if I hadn't gotten to talk here every couple weeks with Maya, I think that I would have thought, oh, I'm the only one that's struggling. I know other students in the program are like, ugh, I'm over it, I'm ready to be done. But I didn't know if anyone else is struggling that much. Not saying that I want anyone else to struggle, but it's just, it's kind of nice knowing that you're not the only one and it's not as a fault of my own. It's like, this just happens and this is what you got to do. And I get to hear advice, maybe something she did that helped her situation, and maybe that can apply to me in a different way. So
yeah,
I thought the recordings were really good and just a nice way to talk about it, because no matter what, your friends, your family, they can hear you talk about how you're struggling or anything, but they don't know exactly what you're going through.
Yeah. And I think that even goes for me with you guys. I think you guys really connected because you were living, like eating, breathing, sleeping the challenges and the change. And me reflecting on my experience as a student is somewhat removed. And so, yes, like I can give you feedback and all these strategies and all this kind of stuff, but I think it was also really good for you guys to kind of bond and be like, okay, hold on, like, is this happening for you?
Yeah.
This is what I'm going through. Like, how are you handling this? Oh, you know, I dealt with that 3 weeks ago. Here, this is what I did, that kind of thing. And I think that's so important to have that support system, you know, with somebody who's going through very similar things that you are.
And I hope that students listening to this in the future can find those examples or anything really that I think there's a lot of different things that we've talked about that would be really helpful to hear. So
yeah. So this is the end.
This is it. It's just so surreal thinking back to the first one. And
oh my gosh, how we were so nervous.
Yeah, we were so nervous.
And now we're...
Me too, don't worry. I was nervous too.
Really? Oh my goodness. Listening to that first episode, I'm like, oh, you don't know what you're getting yourself into.
Yeah, same.
Study more.
I know. It's like if you can go back and talk to your past self, what would you say?
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so just so the listeners know, we actually the three of us went back and listened to the very first episode in preparation for this episode. And for me, I found it fascinating to reflect back on hearing what you guys were talking about, hearing what was standing out to you before you had even started yet. And then how some of those continued throughout. And some of them, I mean, you guys squashed them, changed, and, you know, made that progress very early on. Yeah. And I'm so stoked with the way that it turned out.
Yeah.
I'm excited, and I cannot thank you guys enough for going through this with me.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Seriously, yeah.
And I wish you guys all the best and good luck starting school in a couple days.
Yeah.
Yay, thank you.
Hey, before you go, I just wanted to say thanks for listening to today's episode. If you want to further the discussion, go to our website, otforlife.com, and join our Facebook group. If you like us, here are 3 easy ways to let us know. 1, share our podcast with a friend, colleague, or anyone interested in occupational therapy. 2, leave us a review on iTunes or anywhere this podcast is found. 3, subscribe to us so you don't miss out on any upcoming episodes. Thanks again. We'll catch you next time, OT for Lifers.
I didn't actively seek out something like this, so I don't even know if podcasts with students were.
We could cut that out. That was a really big plane.
And I feel like it went right over the house.
Yeah. It was like a big one, and yeah, it probably veered off right there because I was like, it's kind of loud. It's really loud.
There it is.
Yeah.